Episode 4, Rest in Pain. Audrey is spying on Cooper as he walks through the halls of the Great Northern Hotel. He's doing his tape recorder to Diane. He makes note that today is Laura's funeral, so we have that to look forward to.
Good morning, Colonel Cooper.
Audrey eagerly greets Cooper in the morning, and he invites her to sit down to breakfast with him. I was a little surprised at this.
Audrey, that perfume you're wearing is incredible.
But then his intentions become very clear whenever he asks if Audrey could write her name on a piece of paper for him. And she's just like, okay, sure, because she likes him and she'll do anything he asks, really. And while she's writing her name, he pulls out that note he got that says Jack with one eye on it, and he compares her handwriting to the note. And he's like, Audrey, why did you send me this note? And she's like, well, I just want to, help out any way I can. Cooper still isn't in the know about One-Eyed Jack's, so she kind of explains that it's a gentleman's club, men go there, the girls work there.
Women, work there.
He's like, did Laura work there? She's like, I don't know. She worked at the perfume counter at my dad's department store.
Horns.
He named it after himself.
And he's like, Ronette worked there too. So we learned that Ronette and Laura both worked at Horn's department store's perfume counter. I think Cooper could tell from the first moment that he met Audrey that she has a bit of a crush on him. But, we have a moment here where he lets her know that he knows that she has a crush on him. Because he's like, Audrey, your handwriting has a slant to it that indicates romantic feelings. Be careful.
A heart that yearns. Be careful.
Cooper sees that Harry and Lucy have arrived, and so he dismisses Audrey. They're ready to know who killed Laura Palmer. Well, he walks them through the dream that he had.
My dream is a code waiting to be broken.
The great thing about these people is that they're always on board whenever Cooper goes off on tangents that seem unrelated and kind of hokey dokey. There's never like an outright non-believer in the room. I don't want any of this mystic nonsense. None of them are like that. They're just like so down to hear this dream. He's like, Laura kissed me, and in my dream she whispered the name of her killer. And they're like, who is it? He's like, I don't remember.
Damn.
This is a funny moment. It's like the ultimate fake out, because at the end of the last episode, Cooper says that he knows who killed Laura Palmer. We thought, and Harry and Lucy thought, that they were gonna hear the name of the killer. Well, nope. He doesn't remember the name.
Harry, our job is simple. Break the code, solve the crime.
The breakfast conversation is interrupted by a phone call from Andy, who says that there's a fight at the morgue and they better get over there. Here we see our Sultan of Sentiment, Albert. He's getting into it with Dr. Hayward.
I've got compassion running out of my nose, pal. I'm the Sultan of Sentiment.
Dr. Hayward wants Laura's body to be there for Laura's funeral, which is today.
He won't release Laura's body for the funeral. He's not human.
And Albert wants to keep Laura's body for longer so he can run more tests.
This old fool is obstructing a criminal investigation. Cuff him.
And that's what the heart of this conflict really is. But there's a lot more emotion involved because everyone in the room loves Laura Palmer, and Albert is just acting like she's another body, that he's got to run tests on. Ben Horne is there because it was too much for Leland to be there. And we have a sassy little moment where Ben Horne tries to step in and de-escalate the situation, and Albert is being a sassy little bitch to Ben Horne.
Stupidity, however, is not a necessarily inherent trait.
That gives me great pleasure. I love to see Ben Horne get talked down to because he's not used to that. In all this chaos, Harry and Cooper arrive. Now it's Harry's turn to get a dictionary of insults thrown at him from Albert.
And you chowderhead yokel, you blithering hayseed.
You guys remember last episode when Harry had to give Albert that strong talking to? Yeah, on Laura's funeral day of all days, Harry, he's not up for being the bigger man.
I want no interference from this hulking boob, is that clear?
I guess Harry didn't like being called a hulking boob because he very slowly and deliberately walks right up to Albert, punches him in the face. Albert falls back on Laura's dead body. That's like drama, man. That's like worst case scenario. You're in the morgue, get punched, and fall on a body that's gotta have a funeral today. Cooper orders Albert to have the body back as soon as possible, and he expects those tests to be done by noon.
He hit me. Well, I'm sure he meant to do that.
Poor Albert, honestly. Well, everyone else files out of the room, and Cooper hangs back. He takes a look at Laura's body and fixes her arm that was thrown astray from the impact of Albert falling onto her. And this is a really special moment. You know, they don't take too long, like lingering or playing the dramatic music or anything, but you can tell that Cooper's perspective has already changed. He never met Laura when she was alive, but you can tell that he loves Laura too. He really cares about her. If he didn't, he wouldn't have taken that time to care for her body. We get some more of my favorite show, Invitation to Love. It's on the TV in the Palmer's living room, while Leland is on the couch getting ready for Laura's funeral. It's kind of like one of those moments where you get triggered by the TV. It's no coincidence that this episode in Invitation to Love, the character is writing a letter to his daughter.
My darling daughter, Jade.
And Leland is mentally preparing himself for his daughter's funeral. So, damn, Invitation to Love be getting deep. In walks Madeline, Laura's cousin. It's kind of a touching scene where she's like, Uncle Leland, I'm so sorry. And they hug and they cry together. Now, Madeline. She may look familiar to you, and it's not just because she's Laura's cousin. It's because she's played by the same fantastic actress, Cheryl Lee, who plays Laura Palmer. Now, originally, Cheryl Lee was only supposed to play Laura Palmer, the dead girl. But David Lynch was just so impressed with her. He loved her acting that he wrote this whole character in the show just so Cheryl Lee can get some more screen time because she deserves it. She shines every time she is on screen. She steals the show, not just from her striking beauty, from the way she can really embody an array of emotions in any given moment. Now we are at the Double R Diner, and we see that Norma is talking to her husband's lawyer. You may recall Hank, her husband, is serving time for manslaughter. The lawyer is asking if Norma would be okay coming into court and giving a speech so as to help Hank get on parole and get out of prison early. She seems pretty uneasy about this. I mean, we know she's in love with Ed. We don't know what her relationship with her husband was like, but if he's in prison for manslaughter, he must not be good news.
I usually tell them I have a homicidally jealous husband.
She says to the lawyer that she'll think about it, and when Hank gets out, she can probably get him a job at the Double R. I mean, she is the owner after all.
I own the Double R, Mr. Mooney.
Harry and Cooper arrive at Leo's house. Leo is outside, aggressively chopping wood. Now, before we get into the scene, I just want to take a moment to admire the beautiful yellow leaves behind Leo in this moment. I don't talk about it a lot, but part of what makes this show so great is these beautiful establishing shots. You know, we get a lot of waterfalls, trees blowing in the wind, lights lit up at night. We see a lake at night. Like, there's just so many gorgeous scenes. Despite the dark subject matter, this show has a real cozy comfort feeling. I mean, it could just be that small town charm of Twin Peaks coming through on screen, but watching this show feels like sipping a chai tea or sitting by a fire or reading a book in the rain. It's relaxing in a lot of ways. So Harry and Cooper have some questions for Leo. They ask if he knew Laura Palmer. He says no. Liar.
You're lying.
Coop smells this lie immediately. He's like, yeah, well, everybody knew Laura, okay?
I knew who she was, all right? Everybody did.
He's like, well, where were you whenever Laura was murdered? He says he called his wife, Shelley, on the road in Montana when Laura died. So this is Leo's alibi. Cooper asks if Shelley would attest to that, and he says she would.
She'll confirm this?
She will if you ask her.
Bobby and his father, Major Briggs, are also getting ready for Laura's funeral.
This may be a good time for a brief discussion.
He's like, oh, are you really gonna give me another lecture about smoking cigarettes right now, Dad?
You want to talk about cigarettes? Today?
Yeah, put that cigarette out. But also, he wants to prepare Bobby for Laura's funeral today. And I think that this is just a really sweet scene where Bobby's father is just trying to, like, be a good parent, you know?
Laura died too soon as well.
I really love the dynamic between these two characters in this scene because Major Briggs is just trying to give Bobby some wisdom, prepare him for the horrific reality he's about to face. And Bobby, you know, he just does not want to hear this from his dad.
What's the good of putting someone in the ground?
I think that Bobby just copes in a very different way because he doesn't know how to cope with this, you know? Even whenever Major Briggs is talking to him, the whole time, Bobby is like putting his hand over a flame, which is like self-harm, you know? Well, Bobby's just keeping quiet during this time until Major Briggs says, Bobby, I know you're afraid.
Son, don't be afraid. We'll all be there together.
And then something in Bobby snaps when he hears that.
Afraid?
You know, he gets really offended. He's like, I am not afraid. And he starts yelling at his father.
I'm gonna turn it upside down!
It's noon at the sheriff's station and Albert is ready to present his findings. Pay attention because we are presented with a lot of information. We learned that the bag found in Laura's diary tested positive for cocaine, so did the toxicology reports. So the girl had a little bit of a cocaine habit. We learned that Laura was tied up 2 different times at 2 different locations on the night of her death. And we learned that the twine matches the exact same twine that was used to tie Ronette. Albert also mentions that Laura was tied in a way sort of like this. Cooper mutters this to himself, sometimes my arms bend back, because that is what Laura had told him in the dream. So yeah, sometimes her arms bend back because of the way that she was tied up before she died. Albert also mentions that there are traces of soap on Laura's body that differs from the soap that Laura uses. Albert's theory is that the killer washed his hands and then leaned in to kiss Laura. So that's how the soap traces got on her. Albert makes note that the markings on Laura's neck and shoulders are bite marks and claw marks.
An animal. Look, it's trying to think.
He also mentions that there was plastic found in her stomach that they are currently reconstructing at the lab.
Partially dissolved by digestive acids.
But so far, he can only make out the letter J. What would be plastic with the letter J on it? If you think about it, you could probably guess what it was. At the end of the report, Cooper and Harry get up to leave. Harry leaves the room, but before Cooper can, Albert pulls him aside. Hey, can I talk to you? Albert asks if Cooper will sign these papers as a witness to the assault that happened to him yesterday when Harry punched him. You know, he's going for Harry's badge. He wants Harry to suffer consequences for what he did yesterday. Cooper refuses to do this.
Albert, I'm not going to sign this.
What?
Cooper's response here could really serve as a thesis statement for the entire show. Cooper replies, and I quote, Albert, I hope you can hear me. I have only been in Twin Peaks a short time, but in that time I have seen decency, honor, and dignity. Murder is not a faceless event here. It is not a statistic to be tallied up at the end of the day. Laura Palmer's death has affected each and every man, woman, and child, because life has meaning here. Every life. That's a way of living I thought had vanished. Laura's death is handled very maturely in the show. She's not just a body that creates a mystery for us to solve. She's a real person, and she touched the lives of everyone who knew her, just like everyday people. And I feel like, you know, this show, it doesn't want to gloss over the life of Laura. Like, yes, her death is horrific, but that's not really the focus of the show. The show's focus is on life and love and loss specifically. The show likes to linger on the loss. Cooper's feeling this loss right now too. He didn't even know her. Cooper threatens Albert, you know, he's like, I'm gonna file a report of my own if you go forward with this. So, Cooper ain't messing around. He's got his boys back. Not Albert though. I guess Albert isn't Cooper's boy because he does not care that Albert got punched by Harry. Poor Albert! And at the end of this scene, you know, Cooper, he's very pleasant. He pulls out his tape recorder and he's giving a report to Diane. Cooper asks Diane to look into his pension plan because he wants to purchase a property that he assumes will be a very reasonable price. Any guesses on where Cooper would want to buy property? I think he wants to buy property in Twin Peaks because he just loves it here so much. We see that Ed and Nadine are getting ready for the funeral. Norma is just so happy and so in love with Ed in this moment.
Last night was wonderful.
They hug, and she's just reminiscing on the past. She remembers in high school seeing Norma and Ed together. So Norma and Ed used to date in high school.
You made such a handsome couple.
It's kind of sad. She's like, I was just a little brown mouse.
It was just a little nobody.
But she knew deep down that if he got to know her, that he would fall in love with her forever. But yeah, that is like a knife to Ed's heart because, like, there he is. He's gotten to know her and he wants to leave her ass. That is so sad. And then another thing that stuck out to me about their conversation is, you know, she's hugging him and she looks out the window and she sees James's bike. She's like, whose bike is that? He's like, James. She's like, James who? And then she's like, oh. Like, she completely forgot about her nephew for a second and then remembered he existed.
James who?
Thinking about the past a little bit too much, Nadine. Dang. James comes in all angsty. He says he's not going to go to the funeral.
I'm not going. It's Laura, James.
And then he leaves, slams the doors behind him.
James!
Audrey is doing what she does best. She's sneaking around the hotel. She has this little, like, service door that she goes into so that she can be, like, behind the walls. And she even has this peephole she's made so she can spy on her family. Very creepy, Audrey. Her mom and dad are arguing. Ben doesn't want Johnny to come to the funeral in his Native American headdress. He thinks that's disrespectful and ridiculous. Sylvia really wants Johnny to be able to come to Laura's funeral because Laura was a very important part of Johnny's life. He likes to wear that Native American headdress. It makes him happy. It makes him feel comfortable. Audrey is watching Dr. Jacoby speak to Johnny. You know, he's just kind of very softly trying to coax the headdress off of Johnny's head while the parents are just screaming at each other in the background. Audrey sees all this. She covers up her peephole and gets out of there. So now it is the dreaded funeral time. It's a large crowd. Almost everybody is there. Even the man who's giving the service, you know, was very close with Laura. He says he remembers teaching her at Sunday school when she was a child. We see that James actually does show up to the funeral, but he comes late. And he hangs in the back, you know, kind of far away from the rest of the crowd. Cooper watches him very carefully. I love whenever the man giving the funeral service says Laura was impatient for life to begin, and she was waiting for the rest of the world to catch up with her. She was a very lively young woman. I don't know, just little sentiments like that say so much about this girl that we don't know very well. Whenever the priest is done giving his funeral speech, Johnny yells out, "Amen!" And he's like, "Yes, Johnny, thank you. Amen."
Thank you, Johnny.
And, you know, everybody's okay with it whenever Johnny yells, "Amen." But when Bobby joins in and starts yelling, "Amen!" you know, everyone looks at Bobby. They're like, "Ugh, that's a little weird."
Amen!
Well, Bobby is causing a scene at the funeral now. He starts yelling, calling everyone there a hypocrite.
You damn hypocrites make me sick!
He says, "We all knew that Laura was in trouble, but we did nothing. You guys want to know who killed Laura Palmer? We all did."
You wanna know who killed Laura? You did!
Ugh, that cuts deep. It really does. I really resonate with Bobby's anger. You know, he says, like, pretty words, they're not going to bring her back. And she doesn't want your prayers. She would have laughed at your prayers if she was alive. Whenever you think of grief, you don't think anger, you think of sadness. But I think that anger is also a huge part of grief. Bobby is just like mad at the world that she's dead and that everyone is just going on like they didn't play a part in that. Whenever he seemed to think that Laura was just crying out for help and nobody helped her. Bobby's raging and he catches sight of James and they charge each other, but before they could get any hits in, you know, everyone at the funeral is holding them back. Bobby is yelling, "You're dead! You're so dead, man!" to James.
You're a dead man! Dead!
Leland cries out and dives onto Laura's casket. The casket like lowers in the grave and then it like rises back up and lowers and rises back up and he's just crying, "My baby! Oh, my baby!" And Sarah is screaming. She's like, "Don't ruin this too!
Don't ruin this too!"
And they both are just crying as this machine is going up and down. It's dramatic. It is like the most dramatic funeral you've ever seen in a TV show ever. Really. So much happened at this funeral. There was a fight. You know, Bobby was yelling. Leland's on the casket, going up and down in the casket. Now we're at the Double Art Diner. Shelley is cracking jokes about Leland's big scene he caused at the funeral to these two old men who are just dying of laughter. I'm like, damn, Shelley, that's kind of cold, girl. We see that Ed is at a table with Harry and Hawk, and they invited Coop to come join them to have some huckleberry pie.
Harry, careful who you trust. He's just not one of us.
Trust him on what? He orders pie with 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream from Norma, and as soon as Norma walks away, he's like, "Ed, how long have you been in love with Norma?"
Looks like pie and coffee's on you.
Cooper, you know, he says it's body language, but it seems like he can read minds. You can't hide anything from Agent Cooper.
This must be where pies go when they die.
"Well, why did you really invite me here?" says Cooper. Harry's like, "Okay, listen. Someone has been running drugs across the border into Twin Peaks.
Somebody's selling drugs to high school kids.
And for months now, we've been trying to plan a bust. They believe the bartender at the Roadhouse, Jacques Renault, is the middleman. So the night of the big Roadhouse fight where Ed got that big old bandage on his forehead from, that is the night that Ed was there on a stakeout to watch Jacques Renault. But as we now know, Jacques Renault slipped a little something into Ed's drink, so that didn't really go as planned.
Felt like somebody hit me with a log splitter.
Harry explains that Twin Peaks is different, and Cooper's like, "Yeah, I know. It's good.
That's exactly the way we like it.
The people here are good, the people here are nice. Twin Peaks is very different, but Twin Peaks also has a dark side, an evil in the old woods."
Maybe that's the price we pay for all the good things.
He says that we have always been there to fight it. Coop is like, "We? Who's we?" He's like, "The men before us, and hopefully the men after us." And Cooper's like, "A secret society?"
A secret society.
You know, he is so excited about this. It's like Boy Scouts for adult men, it seems like. So Coop goes with them. They bring him to the Book House. It's a meeting spot for the Book House boys, which is what Harry was describing. It's a secret society of men that has existed in Twin Peaks for a long time. They fight crime, trying to keep the town straight. And not everyone here is an officer of the law, you know? That's why it's so secretive.
Ed, I didn't know you were a deputy.
He's not.
James and Joey Paulson are already at the Book House. They have a man tied up to a chair. We learned that man is Jacques Renault's brother, Bernard. It's pretty bold of them to bring an FBI agent in on their vigilante shit.
Bernard, we've got you tied up in a chair.
You think that Cooper would be a little hesitant to participate in this crime, that they're literally committing, but Cooper is just so down, you know, he doesn't hesitate for a second. They said they caught Bernard coming across the border with an ounce of cocaine, so that's why they have him tied up. They want to question him. Cooper doesn't skip a beat.
Did you ever sell drugs to Laura Palmer?
Bernard is like, I don't sell drugs. Well, he's lying. Cooper knows this. We all know this. And they believe that Bernard is just the mule here, really.
I'm no mule.
Then we see that Jacques Renault is walking to the roadhouse, but he sees a red light is blinking on the roadhouse building. So he runs off and he calls Leo. Leo is in his kitchen messing around with his boot when he gets the call. Jacques tells him that the bus light was on and he needs to get out of there fast. So Leo leaves the house to go get Jacques.
Where are you going?
You don't need to know.
And as soon as he leaves, we see that Shelly has got a little gat. Shelly takes that pretty little gun and hides it in her secret dresser spot. So yeah, Shelly ain't messing around. You know, she is prepared for the next time Leo takes his rage out on her. Josie and Harry are having their romantic time together, and Josie is just telling Harry how scared she is. She's like, I really think that something horrible is gonna happen. She thinks that Catherine and Ben want to hurt her. Apparently Josie had overheard Catherine and Ben talking, and they said that Josie would never suspect, just like Andrew's death. But Andrew's death was just a terrible accident. And Josie's like, was it? Was it? So Josie shows Harry the secret safe where she found those 2 identical books. But whenever she opens the safe this time, there's only 1 book. She's like, I swear there was a book in here before.
You believe me, don't you?
Of course I do.
We now see that Catherine was listening in on this entire conversation. I guess they have like an intercom system in the Mill House, and she was listening in from that intercom speaker, and she's holding the second book in her hands, and she's like, kind of hides it in this other secret spot that she has, where Josie could never find it. Pete comes in. Catherine knows that Pete had helped Josie crack into that safe.
Be a man about it, Pete. Ask me to my face.
He's like, I'm gonna go make sure my tackle box is in my truck. Now it's nighttime and we see a caped figure with a hat is leaving flowers at Laura's grave. Cooper is there, and it's like Cooper was on his own stakeout, you know, just seeing who shows up to Laura's grave at night. He approaches creepy old Jacoby. He's like, hey, why didn't you come to the funeral today? And Jacoby's like, because I'm a terrible person. I'm such a terrible person. I mean, all my clients, you know, they tell me all these things, they confide in me, and they think that I'm their best friend, but really, I don't care about them.
Truth is, I really don't care.
But he says that Laura was different. Laura got to him. He hopes that she can forgive him for not going to the funeral today.
I hope she forgives me.
So now we are back with Josie and Harry, and this is a scene straight out of a soap opera, if I've ever seen one. She thinks that they want the mill taken from her, and that Ben wants the mill land. She's like, do you think that they would kill me for it? And Harry kisses her. He's like, I'll protect you.
Nothing is gonna happen to you. Not ever, not while I'm around.
It's a full moon's night. Cooper and Hawk are at the Roadhouse having a drink together. We haven't seen much from Hawk yet, but here we get this really touching scene where they're discussing the soul, and Hawk is having this monologue, you know, talking about the soul. Hawk doesn't usually say a lot, you know, he's never gonna be the loudest in the room, but he's always gonna be the most insightful in the room. It's really cool to get some insight into Hawk's spiritualism. I think this is a great topic for them to talk about together because, you know, we see that Coop is also very spiritual and he believes in extraordinary things that not everybody else would believe in. So it's a sweet bonding moment between the two, and I love that, you know, Hawk, he's a little bit more slow to get to know, and we just get little bits and pieces of him at a time. This is the most we've seen from him so far. And I love Hawk's soul. He's like, if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that Laura's body's in the ground. People are dancing at the bar, and Leland's in the crowd dancing by himself. Everybody else has a partner, and he's just kind of like got his eyes closed. He's swaying, you know, he just buried his daughter today, and he's really feeling that. He starts getting into it, you know. He starts like opening his eyes, you know, changing up the dance moves, pretending like he's dancing with somebody, but then he goes around and he's like, will you dance with me? And people are like, no, no, no. And he's like crying out, somebody dance with me. And nobody wants to dance with him because he's having a meltdown on the dance floor. Well, Cooper and Harry come in to take him home and they escort him out. Oh. It's a really uncomfortable scene, but it's also kind of funny. Like, it's black comedy, I guess. It's just another way that the show touches on the different ways that people grieve. For Leland, you know, he likes to express his sadness through listening to music and dancing and singing. I think that's a beautiful way of expressing grief, but obviously he got a little too carried away with it here. That is the end of the episode, so now it is time for my Blue Rose and Thorn. I know that there's so much drama that goes on in this episode, but really my blue rose has to be whenever Bobby is talking with his dad before Laura's funeral. It's a more subdued scene, but it just speaks volumes about Major Briggs's character, about Bobby's character, about their relationship to each other and how different they are and how they struggle to understand each other, and Briggs struggles to parent his son. My thorn is whenever Shelley was making fun of Leland. I love Shelley, but she's a little mean-spirited in that moment. I ain't a fan of the bullies.
And this is the daughter in the coffin.
Okay, I just want to give a shout out to all my Patreon supporters. I love you. Thank you. Thank you for supporting me. If you like this video and you like the videos that I make, please consider checking out my Patreon. It's a great way to support me so I can keep making these videos. I upload videos a day early on my Patreon, and I also put out little bonus videos that I like to make from my camcorder footage. So it's fun place. You get extra attention over there, I guess. Until next time, you guys, Camcorder Cameron signing out.